the photo we're going to be working from. The snow goose at low tide, they walk around looking for vegetation that was underwater previously, but now that the tide is out, they'll just walk around and eat whatever they can get. Being that they're in mud the better part of the day, that explains why a white snow goose looks the way it does. We're going to use a masking system that will allow us to actually start from a specific point and then repaint as many times as we want. This way it'll give us a chance to experiment with painting the same picture over and over in different ways if we want to, but it will isolate each area in this particular case. Right now I'm going to go ahead and draw it out, and we're going to get started. Okay, I'm just drawing in the goose, and what I will do is actually rough everything in and get the goose where I want. Right now the head and neck are a little bit too small, so what I'll do is just copy it over and enlarge it a little bit, and then reset it in place till I get it to the proportions I'm happy with. Birds have very subtle curves and angles to them that getting them right sometimes take a little bit of time. But what I will do is then finish in the water and the mud. And we're going to do this a little wee bit different. What I will do now is just start in a master mask, and then we will duplicate it over and create a second mask just for the mud. And then I will use a water transparent layer to make a transparent lock layer. This will give us a place and point to start anytime we want to keep on redoing the painting. We could redo it several times and see which version we like the best. And that way it'll give us a chance to start over. Okay, I pretty well got all the black painted in that I was going to use for the mask. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go down to the water layer, and then I'm going to turn on my show wet, and then I'm going to get my water tool, and what I am going to do is actually start painting in all where my water is, and you will see why. And what this will actually give me a chance to do is just wet this entire layer of all where the water is, and I have to do it somewhat critical only because that will also then define where my mud is. So to keep those borders nice between where the mud is and where the water is, I'm going to do this somewhat systematically, and then that way I will have this saved as its own layer of wet. And then once you get this done, I am doing it in this particular system. So once you have these masks and layers done, then you could go back in and experiment with this particular type of setup as many times as you want, just by saving it as a Rebelle file when you have all your areas protected. And then you could experiment with what colors you want to mix and how you want to mix them, and it'll give you an option to really have a free-form watercolor mixing if you want to. Now, I'll probably still have it somewhat systematic as far as just representing the linear patterns of the mud, and then more importantly, a very soft airbrush look to the water, because I want it to look flat and even. It's fairly calm water, and that is except for where it's running down these very subtle banks, like right in here, maybe right in here somewhere. There's going to be a little bit of a crisscross pattern where the water's making subtle riffles as to where it's running down to the next layer down. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start painting in where all the water is, and then I'll refine those edges and get it completely done to where I want it ready to go, ready to paint. Okay, I'm starting to add the water layer now. Keep in mind, I'm just working with the water tool, and I did set the color to mark my water area a little bit darker. This is just so I could see actually where it's at. And you could choose whatever color you want to represent what your water layer is going to be when you turn on the show wet area. But for me, I made it a little bit darker just so I know exactly where I'm painting and where it's at to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, now that we got our water area pretty well planned out, that was important because anywhere there's water, all the rest of it is going to be mud. And then we already made a specific masking layer to prevent the water or mud from hitting the reeds and the goose. So if I turn off that mask, then that's where everything is still protected also, even from the wet area when I laid it down. I was not overlapping that masking area. So now that I actually am now on the water layer, what I'm going to first do is duplicate that over, and you'll see why here in a minute. And now this one is going to have water on it too. So if I turn this one off and then go to this one, there's the water for this layer. I'll turn that one off, go to this one, and there's the water for that layer. But now since it's only water, what I will do is actually transparent lock this one, and then now I could turn off where the water is wet. And then now I will grab my black and I will make this, let's take the opacity way up. And then I will just go through here. Now you could actually either just do this by fill or just do what I'm doing. And now that I'm already started, I'll just use the brush. I kind of like to watch the transparency layer walk work. And being that the transparent lock is on, then I can actually just use it the way it is. And now that that's all painted in, that is still separate from our actual masking layer. So if I turn this off, there's our transparent lock layer. But to make a mask just for the mud, what we are going to do is we're going to turn this mask off. And we're going to eliminate all the buttons, including the transparent lock. And then we're going to go up here, and we're going to duplicate that one. So now we have two of just the grass and we could verify that. I could turn this one off and this one off. And then now here's our copy of our masking layer. There's two of the same thing. But then what we're going to do is we're going to keep this one here, and we're going to move this one up to here, and then we're going to combine these two. So if I turn this one on, and then if I merge those two layers together, now what I should have is actually a layer that's just going to be for the mud. So in other words, it'll block out the grass, the goose, and the water, which is this one right here. And then now if I turn that one off and then go to this one and turn this one on, then this one is just actually the goose and the grass, and that's it. Everything else will still be paintable. And if I turn that one off and go back down to here, I will still be able to paint my water, only because it still has just the water wet on it where I want the water. But if I take it back to a transparency lock, then I will actually be able to paint only where I painted the water originally. So now I have all my sections blocked off, each with their own mask. And once I get this way, then I would save this as a Rebelle file, only because now that all my areas are blocked off in their individual sections, I could go back in from this point and experiment as much as I want. So when those areas are protected, now then I could go back in and make the mud all different variations, make the water different variations, and then the reeds and the goose itself I will paint by hand. But as far as the water goes, I can even just actually fill the entire area with a nice even color of blue, but then go back in and add subtle streaks of different colors here and there. But the interesting part will be, though, is all the individual areas are protected the way we did it. And we could start from here on out as many different times as we want. Okay, first let's take a look and see how this system is actually going to work. Now, what we could do is, since we're already on the water layer, then what we will do is go up and turn off the water itself to show where it's wet. Now we're still on this layer, and we do have the transparency locked. So if I wanted to, all I would have to do is go up here and grab the fill bucket, go down and grab my blue, And then actually, it's not a continuous shape, so I don't want to have continuous on, and we don't want to use alpha. So now I would adjust the opacity down some, and then now all I would have to do is fill in that area, and that is the blue we would have, and that's the water we painted. Now that is the blue I just used. And then here's our little speckles here that were going to be the riffles. But now since I have that in an individual mask, I could go back in and turn that mask on and then just paint those little spots even a different color if I want to, just to move this right along. Because we still got a long way to go. We still got to do the goose by hand, and then also all the little clumps of submerged grass that is now visible since the water went down with the outgoing tide. So now what we could do is we will then turn off the transparency, go up to here, and we could even rename this one. We'll call it Mask Mud, because that's what it is right now. And then we will turn it on, and then that's the mask mud right there now. So in other words, remember, that's blocking everything off, the water, the goose, the grass, the reeds, everything except the mud. So now what I want to do is make this a mask layer, and then I could turn it back off now. And then now if I go back down to my mud, it is an influence layer, so it should be influenced by this particular mask. If I go down and grab my brown, and what I will do is I'll go to the brush this time, and I'll actually just grab a brush, and we will actually now go over. Now that's way too brown, so we'll get rid of that. We'll go back one, and then we're going to turn the opacity way down. And now again, this is how we could do this. And I'm going to even get away from the edges. Now, if we use just a light brown, we can actually just fill in just the mud. And by doing it this way, now again, since this is a mask, this will work really well for what we want to use it for. And the reason why I say that is, just a quick note, as long as I'm using the brush, I am not letting go at all. And the reason why I say that is I want a nice even coat. And if I do want a nice even coat, then I don't want to lift up on my brush at all, and it'll give me a nice even coat of brown if I want to start with a nice neutral value to start with. Now this right here, I accidentally put brown down in the masking area, so what I can do is go back and get the eraser and then actually go back in and just take that back out if I want to. And then that way, what I will do later is go back in with it with just a darker blue, because that's going to be, this is the part of the water already, and the blue you see is the water, and the brown you see is the mud. So depending on where I wanted to go with this, then I can actually either work on the water or the mud, either one. But then as I'm working on it, now if I want to, I can actually go back in and grab another brown, but then maybe just maybe a dry skip brush. And if I start working in the mud areas, I'm only going to be working within the mud area. So I could go to town and not worry about how I'm actually painting this out, even if I want to add water. But I have to really be careful with water, because I don't want any specific patterns made by the water that are not associated with the mud. I am more concerned about actually making the patterns of the mud versus a specific technique of watercolor. And I think that's where sometimes some beginners of watercolors, if they don't match the technique with the surface, or more importantly, the texture they're trying to render, then the watercolor doesn't look right. But it's really not. It might be just that you're not using the right technique for rendering the objects that you're trying. Now right now, so you could see the water's bleeding it out just a little bit, and that's not bad. That'll give me some actual I quick dried it there. That'll give me some shapes and different things to work with. But now remember, I use grays. I mix them, so with any blue or any brown mixed together will give me a neutral gray. But then one thing nice about working with blues and browns is then I could either have a cooler gray or a warmer gray. And that makes a big difference rather than just having an exact neutral gray. If it's in a illuminated area, you may want a warmer gray. If it's in a shadowed area, a real deep dark area, then you may want a cooler gray, depending on the situation. But now if I put down some blue, and I'll watch, I don't want to put down too much, then what I will do is leave this mixed together, and I will start to get some neutral grays. But here's the thing. Now that I'm putting down blues, it's okay if some of this remains a stronger blue, because that will be the water reflecting off the mud, and that it's staying blue because it's reflecting the sky. But again, I could go to town just by moving this blue everywhere, but it's only going to stay within my masked area. So for that reason, now that I have my masks plural actually designated, then I could go back to where I saved that right when we started now, and then start redoing anything from there on again. So once I have that part done, it's done for good. This way, if I just put water down, I can give it a perfect gradation of blue if I want to, and then start from there. And this way, then I can control what's going to be light and dark wherever I want them to be. But now that this blended in a little bit, this wouldn't be too bad at all. This is something I could work with. But keep in mind, the mud is going to go a lot darker. But now that I just kind of reviewed how this mask and transparent lock layer system would work for this particular painting, I'm going to go ahead and start painting it in from the beginning, right at the end of all our masks being set up. Okay, we're just starting the painting in of the mud, adding the blues. I'll go back and forth with just between the water and the mud, and then I'll save the goose for a little bit later. Right now I'm just trying to refine my shapes and areas, and then start adding in the grasses. But what I did was I added a separate layer for the grass, the submerged grass. This way, this will allow me to paint over the actual mud and water, since it'll be a layer above. And then now I'm just still working in with the reflection, and I wanted to redo that goose with the browns and the blues. We'll do that again here, and I'll show you why, because it'll give us a chance to start over, keeping with the theme. Okay, keeping with the theme of this particular watercolor demo, we know that I could go back and start at the starting point of the finished drawing and all of the masks that were done, and that would give me the opportunity to create as many different versions of this same painting as I wanted, saving each version as a Rebelle file. But now, as I save the Rebelle files, I can also go back in and recycle some of the parts that I saved from those previous versions if I like something better back in those files. In other words, I actually got a little bit of mud when I worked with this snow goose in this version, and what it did was I lost my quinacridone gold detail of the gold, but then working with the blue and the raw umber, that would be the French ultramarine blue, I also kind of blended everything together. And what I did was I intentionally saved a version of the gold done, and this will give me the option to actually import that and redo this area, saving the work I already had done from the previous version. So not only can you go back and start over again and redo everything, but you can also recycle some work you already have done. And what we'll do is we'll actually go up and open a recent file, and that would be the Gold Feathers version, and I will open it. Okay, now that I have it open, this is the older version. This is a previous version of the same painting, but then this is just when I finished my gold. So if I went back to it, what I want to do is turn off everything but the snow goose itself. Even the drawing, I don't need that. Because this is the same project and everything will align perfectly, what I can do now is save this as a PNG. I will put it right beside the Rebelle file. And I will actually just save it as Snow Goose. And then change this to PNG. And save that. And now that's it. Now what I could do is go back and reopen my latest version, which was this one right here. Now here's my latest version, but what I will do now is go up here and import image. And then now this is right here under reference. And there's my Snow Goose PNG. Open it up. And there it is. Now it's coming up as just exactly lined up where I want it. So I will just hit enter. And then it comes up as Snow Goose 2, because I already have one Snow Goose. But now what I can do is I will move this one down above this one. And then I will also go up to filter. And then just hit white to alpha. And that's it. Now I have this one, but if I turn off my original Snow Goose, now here's my redone version of the Snow Goose from the previous version, but now it's in my latest version of my painting. So maybe this time what I can do is actually put a layer in above it to use my blues and browns to shadow and shade the goose itself. And then that way, what I can also do is have a chance to redo this. Now, keep in mind, photographically speaking, I can also actually take anything out of the old version I want to. That if I like the bill and the eyes and everything else, I can leave that there and then just redo what I want and erase that. But now that I imported the previous version, I could keep that and pretty much erase everything else. That it will actually also give me the opportunity to just save some time and redo what I've already had, especially if it's a version that I like better compared to changes I may have made along the lines and really don't like the changes. So with that said, let's try and give this version a new chance and see if we like the new version of the Goose better than the old version. Okay, now that we have our new Snow Goose layer made, that's this one right here. If we turn this one off, then here's the new one, and then we'll turn the other one off, and here's the old one. So again, we're going to try and get rid of all this area down in here and redo this. You can see we lost our gold detail altogether. It's just all kind of blended together. But what happens is I do like the snappiness of the golds up here in the head and neck when both layers are added together. So I could actually leave that part of the old one there. So what I'm going to do is grab my eraser and then just erase the parts. And I have it on 100, and then the size is whatever I want to work with, which is about right here. And then now that I'm on the old Snow Goose layer, I'm going to actually just feather that in like that and leave the brown and the bill and the eye because it's already done. And what I am going to get rid of is what I want to do over. And that is this area right here. And now you could see that I actually have a new clean gold detail that this time I'm going to work on a separate layer so I don't blend them together. And I could go to town with wet blues and browns and let them bleed together, but it won't affect my gold. So I will just go ahead and make a new layer. And we are going to put adjustment and then enter that, and we are ready. And then what I can actually do is grab a blue. I'm going to start with that's the French Ultramarine. I'll go to Cobalt Blue first. And then I'm going to grab, okay, that's okay there. And we need to make it a good bit smaller. About right there. And now I can even turn on the drawing again just to see where my shadow and areas were. And now, and remember, since we already have the mask made, I could do this, put my mask back up, that's this layer right here, and then go and grab my magic wand and select that. And then now that it's selected, I can actually then go back, turn that off, then go back to my Snow Goose layer that I'm working on. That is the adjustment layer. And that will keep me within the goose so I can paint loosely if I still want a nice straight edge. Now, if you're not worried about a straight edge, then we obviously don't need to use the mask and the selection tool. But being that I'd rather go to town and leave these blues and browns mixed together this time, I'm going to actually work on this layer, which is under the gold. And now I'll grab the blue, and then we're going to just do it looser this time. And we can even actually add a little bit more water and leave it run if we want. But now I don't have to worry about this over here. And now I can blend if I want to. But now that I have more water in with the colors, the strokes will actually bleed together a little bit better. And then I'm actually working on my photo, from my photo, on another monitor. And then now this, we could grab some brown, we'll turn it down just a little bit. And you'll see that they'll start working in with a gray, but I don't need gray everywhere. But then now I could actually blend. And it's not going to affect my gold. I could still see my gold right here real nice. So if I go to my blend and I get just this little wee bit softened up and leave the straight edges in just some of the areas, like right in here, and then leave this here, and then if I let this drip down and bleed, it's not going to affect my gold since it's on a separate layer. So I think I'll quick dry that where it's at, and then I'm going to go back and add a little bit more blue, darker this time, but just a little bit at a time, so it actually has that multiple brush stroke layer look of them overlapping, which is a nice interesting watercolor effect. And this back in here is going to be a good bit darker, and I want to actually keep quick drying it. And that'll push that area back a little bit more. And then I'm going to add some brown to that. And again, since I'm working with the selection tool, all I have to do is worry about painting my colors and where they go. We're going to put some brown right here. We can make the brush a little bit bigger and cut back. And then let's see how that looks. Deselect. It looks a little bit better than it was. We can actually then soften this area up just a little wee bit. But again, I won't lose my golds. They'll be over top of that blue. So that's something I won't have to worry about. And then I can also feather those out just a little bit. See if it looks better. One thing nice about digital, you can always undo. But we'll leave it like that. And then I'm going to put a little bit more blue in the neck right here. And we'll go with that. And then now, again, left those two layers of brown together, and later on, once I get closer to being done, again, I can sandwich all the layers and then just combine them all, merge them all, and then I'll be able to work on what different things I want. But right now, for example, my mud is still fairly light, and what I could do is exaggerate different things of my photograph just to actually make this goose look like it's more in light. So what I mean by that is if I go down to the mud layer and then actually duplicate it, and now we got a much darker look, because keep in mind they are transparent layers, one over top the other. But then I can even go up here, and if I make it a multiple, or even, I think this would be best using overlay, and you'll see why. Overlay is actually halfway between screen and multiple. Multiple will make everything the 50% and darker, and screen will make everything 50% lighter and lighter, but overlay does them both at the same time. So if I click on overlay, what it did now was lighten up my lighter areas and darken up my darker areas, and that's what I kind of want on a bright sunny day. I need some more contrast. And then again, what I will do is also go back to my water layer and just make it darker and exaggerate that, so this white part of the goose jumps out at me, because you cannot have light without dark. So to try and make this white snow goose looking like it's standing in direct sunlight, I need to darken up the background just to emphasize that effect. So let's do that next. Okay, now I'm just going to go back to the water layer and start splashing in some water here and there, some blues, maybe a little bit of cobalt violet again, and just to try and make the goose look lighter. We'll do that indirectly by making the background darker. But what I will let you know is I'm also going to paint around the reflection here too, and then down around this side and over, and that way that'll lighten up the reflection indirectly also, just to also go along with the lighter looking goose. So let's go ahead and just do that speed painting. Okay, just a quick update. Pretty much got the water a good bit darker. Now you could see what it did to the direct light area of the white goose. It pronounced it a little bit more, and then I just made some streaky patches here and there. Now keep in mind, when you first started this painting of this nature, then you could have went right into painting the strokes here and there and not started with the wash of light blue. But what I was more importantly interested in is just showing you different ways of doing things. There has been questions of what colors I use and how I pick my colors. Again, just a quick refresher, I'm just using my 18 color plus sap green for my real colors. As far as the regular traditional watercolors, I like to stick with those, and those are the ones I work with. And those are what pretty much I'm familiar with. But more importantly, they only apply to this painting. So when I pull my colors out, most watercolor traditional artists will actually only work with colors that are either warm or cool, and everything else might not matter as much to them. And what I mean by that is, even just like the cobalt violet I use, it's a little bit warmer than blue because it has red in it. It's leaning towards purple. So for that reason, use whatever colors you like or you think apply to your painting, and then that's also going to, without a doubt, depend on how realistic or how abstract you want it to look. So again, I would also more or less dwell on a technique more than I would choice of colors. But this particular system could give you the opportunity to start over and over and over from a particular starting point. And then again, if you're experimenting and you find something you like, save it right away as a Rebelle file. And then that way you could go back to it and pull pieces out that you want and then reuse them, or at least have the latest starting point where you could keep going from there. And that's what I did with the Goose intentionally, just so now you could see the gold kind of is more pronounced, and it shows up much better over top of the blue, and it's very subtle, but it is there. I do like this version better. You could see the quinacridone gold much better. And again, if we even wanted that a little bit stronger, we could also actually even just duplicate that layer over and make it a little bit stronger, and then just go with that. But otherwise, we did improve the Goose. Now, is there anything we could do with the background? Now, the Goose has a nice harder edge that it's showing up better up against the darker water. But is there anything we could do to the background to give it the illusion of a bright sunny day? Now keep in mind, we have a ways to go. We have to maybe even put some shadows here and there if we can, and then also just some strong highlights that would be almost pure white, that'll be pretty much like sparkles of wet that will be reflecting back, and just a few other things just to snap it up a little bit, crisp it up here and there. The little wee script work at the end sometimes makes a really big difference. But for now, can we give ourselves a second version of this particular setup, the way the water and the mud is? I think we can. I have a few photos set up that what I will do is import them. Just go up to here and hit File, and then Import Images right here. And then I'll just put them in a folder over here, and then we'll open them up and just briefly talk about them and see if these references can actually help us improve this painting, or at least just give us a second version. Now let's import our pictures. Okay, everything is as it was. The only thing I did was bring in our two photos, and let's take a look at them now. Now remember, the Goose now has a pretty hard edge up against the darker water, and we indirectly lit it up just by darkening the background. But is there anything we could do with the water and mud to make it look like an illusion of a bright light coming through? Now right now, we pretty much just have just about a strong left to right light angle that you could see that the shadows are just on the very right hand side of the Goose, and that's it. Now we could easily just start shadowing this and put more blues and browns all the way around to here, and that will change our light angle from the upper left hand corner. Now that's something we may have to do if we try this, and this is what we may try. I'll open up the first photo and you'll see what I mean. And here's the first photo. Now what's going on here is actually you could tell that the upper left hand corner is very bright, and that's where the sun is, and then you're getting some glare and a lot of reflection. Now what I mean by reflection is you could see that in photography, a lot of photographers use polarizers. Now we won't get into that, but what we do need to get into is the angle of what we're looking at. Now you could see that the water is a lot darker here because we're looking down into it and we could see the bottom. Where out here, once you start getting a less and less angle, then you're going to start reflecting more and more of the background and light. So oddly enough, look here, right in through here, and then come up through here, and it's interesting how right in here you could start to see the reflection of the blue sky and the sand, and right in here is where you could start to see the reflection of the sky on the water. So the angle is roughly the same, and what we could do is possibly use this just a reference to change the look of our painting. Now if I open up the second one, here's the second one. Now this one's even much more dramatic, and it has the light coming from the right-hand side. But now with that in mind, you could see how bright the sky is over here, and then the water is very bright also. And then keep in mind, these waves are backlit where these are not, because the light is now going alongside them more versus having the wave in between you and the light perfectly. Now there's a lot of actually backlit sand here that's casting shadows straight out away from the light, obviously, but what we're interested in is how bright these corners are and where the light's coming from, and it's definitely given an illusion of a bright sunny day. Now if we close these out, maybe what we could do is actually take the water and the mud and erase some of this out and slowly feather it into what's here, to where we get about to right in here, and then leave the rest of it just as it is, but feather this all out real light. Now what that'll do is give us another option. and that is to be able to cast shadows out here. Right now, if I cast my shadows, the dark mud is very tough to cast a shadow across it. You barely would be able to even see it. So for that reason, if we make the illusion of a real bright sun over here, it'll give us a much lighter mud that some of these clumps, then we can even add a couple more, they can actually cast a shadow out across the lighter colored mud, and then maybe it'll give the illusion even more to help support where that sun is coming from. Keep in mind, shadows can be seen across water only in specific occasions, and that's usually if the water is really muddy. Then what will happen is the water will not absorb the light; it'll just reflect off, and then you could see a shadow. Where in most cases, if the water is real clean and clear, then it's pretty tough to pick up a shadow across real clear water. But now, with that in mind, let's go into some speed painting, and then we will try and lighten this up and just feather it into what's here. And again, then we'll save that, and that'll just give us a second version to compare to this one, if anything else, because it will be quite different, that we'll be able to cast our shadows and do some different things that would be pretty tough to do right now. Let's get started. Okay, I'm just going to start working with the water, then go right to the mud, and I'm just slowly feathering in lighter and lighter. Now I'm working on the goose, just redoing the shadows to make the light coming from more behind it, and a little bit of a lower angle also, the edges of the legs and what have you. And then also I'm just going back in and adding a few more clumps of grass, and just to change a few things around, just to lighten them up. We'll talk about some of the changes that this may have had that caused for us also. Okay, I got pretty much the water just faded in from left to right down in here. Now it's much darker down here, and it does seem like it gives us the illusion of light coming from the slight upper left-hand corner. But now what that did was, it actually even got me thinking that right now, this water behind the goose is a pretty strong textured because of the paper, and I may not have used enough water with the paint. And it looks quite different than this water over here. For me to make this look like nice, calm water with just maybe a little bit of action running right through here, and we could do that right through here and right through here also. But more importantly, the water that's behind the goose now, I think it would look much better if it was softened up, remained that dark, but just softened up, and just to get rid of that paper texture and also the dry brush effect. I think this would be an opportunity to just show where sometimes if the technique doesn't match the object, it could really throw you off. Now let's just try and go in, and we will just go to the water layer, and then we're going to put our transparent log back on. I'll close these back out, and then what we will do is go to the blender, and I'm just going to take it down a little bit at a time, and we'll keep it as big as we can just to so we don't get any streaks. We'll just make nice even blends of color here. And then what I'll do is I'll just take it across here just real lightly, just to kill that dry brush effect. And what I want to do is still keep the variations of color in here. Even this like a little bit of cobalt turquoise here, and then the cobalt violet down here. And just to get rid of the real heavy texture, and we'll see what that does in real time to the water. And I'll get rid of that little bit there. Get a little bit of this right here, and I'm just touching down real lightly, just to barely touch it. And since I have the transparent lock on, the only thing I'm doing is just the water again. But now this right in here with that little patch of cobalt violet there and a little bit of cobalt violet in here is really coming out as just a nice color change for the water itself. And then up in here is still a little bit darker. And then now the way that is, oh boy, I think that looks a lot better than the hard textured water before. So I think I would even go with this, and then even compared to our first version, I think I already like this one better, with just the upper left-hand corner starting out almost pure white paper and then going into the colors down in here. And it kind of just creates a three-dimensional movement with the gradation of colors, and that would be for the water and the mud. So I'm going to go with this, but what I'll do is I'll just go back in and just clean up a couple things here and there, maybe blend in some of this mud with the water, just do some different things until we can wrap this one up, and then that will be it, and we'll talk about those couple of changes, and that could be it. I softened up the water just a little bit more, and I destroyed the edges of the mud in the upper left-hand corner just to go with that glare and hard reflection and to reduce the contrast. Okay, we're just going to be about wrapping this one up, and what I'm going to do is actually just go back in to the Goose, and it's already there, and I will grab my eraser, and what I want to do is just go back in and take a little wee bit more out of this area right in here, just real lightly, just to give it a little bit of a glow on this side of the face. I'm taking a little wee bit off at a time. And then what I also want to do is actually put in some water just right in here, but again, just to show where the running area is as far as the water just slowly draining down. But what I want to make sure I do is go back to the visual settings, and I don't want no edge darkening at all, so I'm going to turn that completely off. And then what I will also do is make sure I don't have any tilt or anything on there, and I don't. So now I will actually go back down to the water and start a new layer. And then what I want also to do is to wet that layer and then go back to my blues, and I will get the cobalt blue, and we will go up here and make it a little wee bit bigger, and just real little bit of color at a time and a whole bunch of water, only so it puddles out in those areas, but it will also should not have any edges. I will put some right in here, and then we'll let it fan out and completely dissolve that edge. And again, I could even put some cobalt violet in this also and let it fan out with it. And then we can even help it along with a little bit of blending. Since it's its own layer, I won't destroy anything that I already have, but it looks like it has a pretty good head start on me anyway, so I am going to just very well maybe just leave it the way it is. And with that wet layer and a whole the water on the brush turned up all the way, and then plus also just a little wee bit of color at a time, it will blend those areas out, and then it will also create a subtle path for us too. And then that is where the water is draining. And then again, I can even still put some cobalt violet in here and there on that particular layer. And since it's its own layer, we can always go back and erase it out, or just take it out, remove it if we don't like it. But now this right in here isn't too bad. I will leave it the way it is. And then I do like the subtle glow on the face a little bit better too. But with all that said, I think this one's pretty well done. But remember, we started out with 3 different layer masks to start this, and that was 2 mask layers and a transparent lock layer, just so we could work on each object at a time. And then we saved a few different versions and brought back the quinacridone gold for the Goose, and we could have done that anywhere along the line. As far as if you see something you like, but you're not quite finished, then save it, and then at least you could go back to it and recycle it if you have to. But then also it'll give you a starting point for just trying different versions and seeing which one you actually want to go with even more. Now, I like this one better, so I just stayed with this one and finished this one out. But first, let's try one last little change. And that is, I'm going to take out a couple of these tufts of grass up here in this corner. The shadows are okay, but you could barely see them. And what I thought was, maybe if we try a tuft of grass like this, here and even here, what would be interesting is I could even take the grass off the picture, but then the shadows of whatever the grass would be like would be coming out across here, and we'll see what that looks like, just as one last option to see if it'll improve anything or not. Okay, I started with the eraser just to keep that glow effect from that back upper left-hand corner, and I also went ahead and softened up some of the greens a little bit too, just to tone them down. But that should be about it. Okay, I think that's about it for this one. I did make these subtle changes again, and I wanted to leave them kind of bleached out just to keep with that real light, dramatic, washed out look from the glare and the actual reflections off the water. Even though they're backlit, real hard black lines up against this light background, I think would have jumped out at you too much. And so I wanted to just tone them down just to have like an illusion of some grass there. But they were diffused because of the lighting. And then everything else, these could be a little bit more darker because they're closer to you and you're looking more down on them at a much different angle. And then the goose itself, we cleaned it up a little bit and gave it just a nice glow to it around the face. But again, this is not about this picture. It's all about just being able to change things as you want to, no matter what your subject matter is, and no matter how realistic or abstract you want to make it. So hopefully this particular tutorial will just help you, give you options and opportunities to go in different directions with the same piece and give yourself a chance to change things around just to see which ones you like better. And then obviously sometimes coming back with a fresh mind will give you a different insight as to what direction you could go with a painting. But having options is a great opportunity to create the best painting you can out of that particular subject matter. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and until we see you out at the field or in the studio again, thanks again. Bye for now.